They called her the mechanics girl, like it meant something small, like grease on hands or dirt on shoes, like a stain that wouldn't wash out. But 17-year-old Zoe Brooks never minded oil under her nails. Her hands spoke fluently in clicks, turns, and pressure gauges, just like her mother's once did. The same mother who died young, leaving behind silence, secrets, and an old tool chest. One day, in the shadow of men who overlooked her, Zoe turned a bolt, and the world heard the sound. The engine was older than she was. 1989, maybe earlier. A big, boxy thing with rusted screws that groaned when she moved them. Zoe leaned into the chassis, wiped sweat off her temple with the back of her hand, and tapped the socket wrench twice before twisting. Click, click. A man in coveralls passed behind her and didn't look. No one ever did. They saw Earl Brooks, her father, respected, gray around the temples, salt of the earth. But not her. Just the kid sweeping the floor, bringing coffee, holding the light. "Zoe!" her dad called, voice gravel thick. "Lunch." She sat back on her heels, pulling herself out from under the car. Sunlight filtered in through the garage door, catching the floating dust like glitter. Her back ached in that good way. Earned, clean. She wiped her hands on her jeans and followed him to the small metal table near the front. "Egg salad," he said, handing her a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. "Living large?" she said, smiling tiredly. He didn't smile back, just looked at her for a beat too long. She noticed that sometimes, like he wanted to say something and couldn't. The bell above the door jingled. A man in a pressed shirt and a stiff smile stepped in. His dress shoes clicked sharply against the floor. "Earl," he said, "mind if I borrow your daughter?" Zoe blinked. The man was Mr. Franklin, director of the Philadelphia Technical Center. Her school counselor had mentioned something about internships, but she hadn't applied. "She's on the clock," Earl said slowly. "I'll be quick." Franklin smiled at Zoe. But it wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind of smile people wear when they're already certain of your failure. "I've got an opportunity," he said, folding his arms. "A summer internship. Hands-on. Thought you might be interested." Zoe said nothing for a second. She wasn't used to people offering her things. "I didn't apply." "I know," he said, "but we like to encourage grit." That word, grit, like she was some experiment. A long pause, then she nodded. The next morning, she walked into the tech center, wearing her dad's patched-up denim jacket and scuffed boots. No one greeted her. A few mechanics lifted their heads and looked away. The walls smelled like burned metal and cheap coffee. Her name wasn't on any clipboard. No one gave her a locker. She wandered until someone tossed her a visitor badge and pointed toward the back room. She stood quietly in a corner for most of the morning, watching. The men joked and threw parts like footballs, grease smearing across their palms like war paint. Nobody asked her to help. Nobody asked her name. At lunch, she sat alone. She ate a cold sandwich and watched a vending machine blink with an out-of-order sign. "Hey!" someone called, and for a moment, she looked up. But the voice wasn't for her. Later, as the sun dipped low, Franklin strode into the workshop, clapping his hands once. "Everyone," he said, "let's have a little fun." He pointed to a covered car at the far end of the room, a sleek shape under a silver tarp. The guys stopped what they were doing. One or two chuckled. "This here," Franklin said, pulling back the cover, "is our prototype, the Vireo." The Vireo was all curves and teeth. It looked like a shark bred with a spaceship. Zoe felt her breath catch. I think, Franklin said, turning toward her, our new intern should do the honors. A slow hush fell. A few grins. One man snorted. Another elbowed his friend. Go on, Franklin said. Let's see if you can even find the ignition. Zoe stared at him, then at the car. Her heartbeat wasn't fast. It was deep, a kind of quiet that pressed from the inside out. She stepped forward. What, gonna whisper it awake? Someone muttered. She ignored them. Up close, the Vireo was humming slightly, like it had its own pulse. She touched the hood. The metal was warm. She glanced at the dash. Bare, sleek, unfamiliar. She didn't try to start it. Instead, she popped the hood. A hush. What the hell is she? Zoe leaned in. The engine compartment was dense. Not quite combustion, not quite electric. Some hybrid Frankenstein design with tangled logic. She reached for a spanner. What are you doing, kid? A mechanic said, voice half laugh. She didn't answer. She found the circuit path, traced it with her eyes, saw the fault. The relay wasn't grounding. She twisted 2 wires gently, adjusted a clip. Then she turned back to the cabin. Sat in the driver's seat. Closed her eyes. Pressed the starter. The car purred to life. Not loud. Not flashy. Just a low, elegant hum. Perfect. The shop was silent. Even the vending machine had gone quiet. Zoe stepped out and wiped her hands on a rag. No one clapped. No one spoke. But one man, tall with a fading red beard, stared at her for a long beat. Something shifted in his eyes. At home, dinner was chicken and rice. Her brother Josh cracked jokes between bites. Earl listened with that same silent weight. Zoe sat at the table but kept seeing the Vireo in her mind. The wires, the hum, the way the silence afterward had felt heavy, charged. So, Josh said, you really working on that secret thing in the shed? She froze. What? He bit his lip. Nothing. Earl looked up. Zoe? Her voice caught. Just something I'm tinkering with. The room grew still. Outside, wind moved through the oak leaves. After dinner, she slipped out to the small shed behind the garage. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. Blueprints lined the wall. Her mother's. The handwriting, the sketches, the strange notations she never fully understood. And in the center, half-built, was an electric motor unlike anything in production. She touched it gently, like it might bruise. The next morning at the center, everything felt different. Franklin walked past her and didn't smile. His jaw was tight. She caught him watching her once, but his eyes weren't curious. They were narrow. By noon, she was called to the office. You've been busy, Franklin said, standing by the window. She said nothing. People are talking. That stunt yesterday. Impressive. Still, she said nothing. I've been informed, he said carefully, that you've been working on your own design. Off hours. Unauthorized. Her stomach turned. Now, he continued, walking toward her slowly. Why don't you tell me what exactly you're building? She stood there, silent. He leaned closer. Zoe, this isn't a game. If there's proprietary tech involved, I have to... It's mine, she said quietly. My mother's. His mouth opened, then closed. A long silence stretched between them. He turned away. Go back to work, he said, but his voice had lost its edge. Zoe walked out of the office and into the hallway. her steps echoing. Her heart wasn't pounding. It was settled, still. Like the moment right before a storm. She knew now they saw her, and they were afraid. Zoe never wanted a spotlight. She liked shadows, engines, things that made sense. But now the world was watching, and not kindly. The challenge wasn't the machines. It was the people. Their silence could bruise deeper than their words. And when someone doesn't want you to rise, they don't push. They wait for you to fall. But Zoe Brooks wasn't falling. She was learning how to stand taller. The new project came without fanfare. A list of specs, a broken chassis, a deadline so tight it cut. Franklin handed it to her personally. No smile, no warning, just paper stapled at the top and a look that said, "You'll break before you finish this." Zoe read it twice, then again. Design and build a working drive unit for the Vireo's next-gen concept. 3 weeks, no budget, no help. When she looked up, Franklin was already walking away. She spent the first hour in silence, the second hour sketching, the third, realizing the center's 3D printer had mysteriously gone offline. By the next day, her workbench had been moved to a corner. No outlets nearby. The lamp above it flickered with a soft, irritating buzz. Her requests for basic parts went unanswered. She asked once, then stopped asking. The others passed her like she wasn't there, laughed just a little louder when she walked by. A bolt she'd carefully labeled disappeared. Someone swapped her drill battery with a dead one. Small things, but they added up. "You need help?" a voice asked behind her on the third night. She turned. It was the red-bearded mechanic from before. Jim. Maybe 50, maybe 60. She wasn't sure. "I'm fine," she said. He looked at her hands. Cracked knuckles, a deep gash near the thumb. "You're not," he said, then walked away. But the next morning, a working soldering iron was quietly left on her bench. And later that week, a shipment of parts she hadn't ordered, but desperately needed, appeared in a dented box with no label. She said nothing. He said nothing. But sometimes they nodded at each other like two old trees in the same wind. Zoe's design was different. Not revolutionary, just real. Simpler, lighter, modular. Made for people who couldn't afford $10,000 fixes. She wrote her code by hand, tested with stripped wires and salvaged boards. When it sparked once and smoked, she just smiled and rewired. At night, she went home and sat with her notebook. The blue one, her mother's handwriting in the margins. A formula half scratched out. A line reading, "It's not about speed. It's about who gets to move." She stared at that sentence more than once. Meanwhile, something shifted in the center. Not loud, not fast. But one afternoon, someone asked if she had a spare fuse. Another time, a guy named Ray lingered too long near her bench and asked what a certain wire did. And then one day, a reporter showed up. Local paper. Young woman. Brown jacket, too big for her shoulders. "She's just looking for a feel-good story," she said. "They told me a teenage girl fixed the Vireo." Zoe blinked. It wasn't a story. It was a test. "Well," the reporter smiled, "you passed." By the next week, her name was in a sidebar next to a headline about youth innovation. A small photo, blurry, but it was her. Franklin saw it. Of course he did. He didn't say anything for 2 days. Then he called her into his office. Closed the door. "You're enjoying your attention," he said, flipping the paper onto the desk. I didn't write it, Zoe replied. His eyes narrowed. Do you know who holds the patents for the original electric torque design? She hesitated. My mother, she said finally. He studied her. That's classified material. It was never classified, she said. She filed it before she died. He tapped his pen once, twice, then dropped it. That technology was absorbed by the center in 2012, he said. You're walking a fine line, Zoe. She said nothing. She didn't need to. She could feel it in his voice. Something more than anger. Fear. The next morning, an internal memo leaked. Someone forwarded it to her personal email. Anonymous sender. It listed a review of proprietary claims around the Vireo engine. It also mentioned a potential investigation into original source material. That same day, Jim handed her a folded piece of paper with shaking hands. A copy of an old patent filing, her mother's signature at the bottom. Date stamped. You should keep this safe, he said. Why are you helping me? She asked. He looked down at his coffee cup. Your mom helped me once. Long time ago. Zoe didn't ask more. That evening, her father sat quietly at the dinner table. You're making waves, he said. Josh laughed. She's practically famous now. One article and the school won't shut up. Zoe played with her fork. It's not about fame. Earl leaned forward. Then what is it about? She hesitated. Then, she wasn't supposed to disappear. He nodded slowly. She didn't. At the center, the tension grew tighter. Franklin avoided her. The mechanics watched her, then looked away. But some of them, quiet ones, started leaving little things on her bench. A new clamp. A note saying, "Nice work." A diagram, unsigned. It wasn't much, but it was real. The day the press called again, Franklin held a meeting behind closed doors. Raised voices. A slammed file drawer. By noon, Zoe was told her project would be reevaluated. By 3, she was told not to return the next day. Suspended. No explanation. She packed her things in silence. Jim stood at the doorway. Don't stop, he said. I didn't plan to. The hallway felt longer than usual. The air heavier. She stepped outside into a low gray sky. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Whistleblower claims patent fraud at Philadelphia Technical Center. Her name wasn't in it, but her mother's was. She looked at the clouds, the buildings, the people passing, and for the first time in days, she smiled. Not wide, just enough. She wasn't invisible anymore. The hearings were held in a room with thin carpet and bad coffee. Zoe sat beside her father, wearing her mother's old navy cardigan. Across from her, 2 lawyers, one from the center and one corporate. Franklin sat at the far end, silent, his hands folded neatly on the table like he was praying. A woman with round glasses leaned forward and asked Zoe to speak clearly. She didn't read from a paper, didn't use slides. She just spoke. The design is based on my mother's work. It's not theoretical. It's hers. She filed for the patent in 2009 under her name. There's no corporate attachment. The files were in our garage. She never sold them. The woman nodded. One of the lawyers scribbled something without looking up. Franklin cleared his throat. That technology evolved over time. What's in the Vireo today is a result of years of collaboration. She never collaborated with you, Zoe interrupted, her voice steady. A quiet fell over the room. Franklin looked at her. For a second, something flickered across his face. Regret? No. Recognition. After the meeting, outside on the sidewalk, Earl handed Zoe a warm cup of coffee. You did right, he said, his voice low. I don't know if it'll matter. It already does. 2 days later, the headlines broke. Teenage mechanic triggers tech center investigation. Who really built the Vireo? New evidence emerges. Legacy of engineer Grace Brooks resurfaces through daughter's fight. Zoe's phone buzzed nonstop. Calls from newspapers, emails from STEM groups, even a handwritten letter from a retired scientist who once worked with her mom. She didn't answer most of them, but she did answer one. A woman named Carla Montrose. She ran a nonprofit in Baltimore focused on mentorship for young women in trades. She invited Zoe to visit, to speak, to show what hands-on talent really meant. Zoe said she'd think about it. At the center, things shifted quickly. An independent audit began. Franklin was placed on leave. New interim leadership brought in outside reviewers, people with clean records, sharp eyes. Jim was promoted to technical supervisor. His first act, ordering new benches, better tools, and offering Zoe her spot back. I don't know if you want it, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. But the door's open. She looked around. The floor still smelled like oil and burnt plastic, same scuff marks on the corner tiles. But something felt different. People nodded at her when she walked by. A few smiled. One even clapped her on the back and said, "Damn good work, Brooks." She stayed late that evening, fixing a stalled hydraulic setup. A young intern, nervous, all elbows, watched her work. "You really did all that?" he asked, eyes wide. "No," she said, tightening a bolt. "I just didn't stop when they wanted me to." At home, Josh pinned a newspaper clipping to the fridge with a pizza magnet. "Told you," he said. Famous. Earl didn't say much, but he cleared out a spot in the shed, neatly lining her mother's notes into a waterproof binder. Left it on her workbench like a quiet apology to time. And then came the ceremony. The tech center invited local press, small, clean stage in front of the main building, rows of folding chairs. Zoe stood stiffly in the second row, while a man in a suit gave a speech about innovation and integrity. Then came her turn. She stepped up, gripped the edges of the podium, and looked out. The lights were too bright, but in the front row, she saw Jim, her dad, Josh, a few of the younger mechanics. She took a breath. "You don't need a degree," she said slowly, "or a fancy name, or a legacy that anyone else understands." She paused. Let the quiet settle. "My mom once told me, you don't have to be someone important to do something that matters. I didn't get it then. I do now." Another pause. Sometimes the hardest part is staying in the room, being looked past, talked over, waiting until they notice you're still standing. She stepped back, didn't wait for applause. Walked down, straight into her dad's arms. After the event, a reporter asked what she planned next. "Finish my engine," she said, "then teach someone else how to build theirs." A week later, the Tech Center launched a new scholarship program, the Grace Brooks Fellowship, for students in underfunded schools, especially girls, interested in mechanical engineering and design. The brochure had a photo of Zoe, not smiling, just standing next to a motor, her hands dirty. The email applications rolled in. Hundreds. In the break room, someone had scratched her name into the side of the vending machine with a key. Next to it, someone added a heart. Zoe saw it and didn't say a word, but she smiled, just slightly, and walked out, a wrench in her back pocket. In the back of the shop, her old lunchbox sat on the table. Someone had filled it. A small note taped to the side read, "Thought you could use this. Thanks for not quitting." Inside, a thermos of soup, a wrapped sandwich, a cookie. Simple, real, just like her.